Once again, welcome back to Brand Institute of Forensics and Security. My name is Wayne. We are meeting together again for fire safety protection. And today we are going to be very fast and discuss a few issues here related to case studies. And the purpose of this case study is to learn the lessons from whatever happened and where we might have gone wrong, and how we might handle the issues better in future. Because we say security starts with us. Security starts with each one of us. We are all responsible. If a fire is occurring at your facility or your neighboring facility or in your community, you have a responsibility to do something, to respond, to try to extinguish the fire, to try to save casualties, to try to evacuate people, to try to provide first aid, to try to take people for medical attention at recognized hospitals, eventually to try to minimize damage and to try to bring everything together through a course of investigation and to provide recommendations for the future. Therefore, I'm going to try my level best and present to you these case studies in the shortest time possible. This is just a learning experience that we have to imagine what has happened in our republic. Specifically, I'm just concentrating on what has happened at home, what has happened in our country, Kenya, related to fire emergency. Then we start by saying most destructive fire disasters in Kenya's history. Each fire leaves a burn in the memories of those it maims and guts through the hearts of those who have to watch their loved ones being sorted from among the smoldering ashes. For others, it is a loss of limb, loved ones, and property. Fire is a serious threat. Fire is a serious threat that leads to loss of life, leads to serious injuries, leads to destruction of property, among other issues. We are going to look at case studies, and what we shall look at is the double fire strategy of Kenya. Double fire strategy of Kenya. When we talk about the double strategy fire of Kenya, we see that within days of each other, two catastrophic fires occurred in Kenya within 2 days of each other. On January 28, 2009, a BC supermarket was destroyed in downtown Nairobi. You remember Nakumatt downtown. Shortly thereafter, on February 2nd, an overturned petrol tanker exploded near the village of Molo, 200 kilometers from the capital city, Nairobi. These two disasters, in an urban and a rural setting, respectively, illustrate the lack of disaster readiness on a local and national level. This was 2009, and I believe by now we are 2023. I believe by now we have, over those years, we have done our level best to improve our disaster readiness, both at urban and local areas. Also, with the county governments in place now, I believe that we have done our level best to improve despite logistical challenges, lack of funding, lack of resources, lack of well-trained personnel, and even lack of finances to manage these disasters, and lack of equipment and lack of awareness. I believe that we have done the best to prepare for these disasters. Equally, when we remember what happened in Kenya related to terrorism, when we remember the US Embassy bombing downtown, when we remember the Westgate attack, and when we remember the Dusit D2 attack, we see that over a period of time, we have improved how we managed specifically the Dusit D2 attack compared to the Westgate attack. We see a lot of improvement. Also, when it comes to fire disasters, we have improved as a republic. Therefore, the results in the aftermath, 26 bodies were recovered from the ruins, most of them unrecognizable. Many critically ill patients will later succumb to their injuries, bringing the death toll to 46. This was at Nakumat. At Molo, 91 lives were claimed at the scene. 91. 178 patients were admitted to various hospitals, 40 of them who died. So we see 91 plus 40 is 131. You all know that we lost more than 131 because there are people who disappeared from that tragedy and they have never been seen again. We don't know where they are. You see, it is a matter that needs a lot of concern because you can see what is happening at Shakahola. That families are reporting that their loved ones went missing like 10 years ago and they don't know where they went. And now they are trying to see if the people who are being recovered from the graves at Shakahola Forest are among their family members. Equally, in this fire tragedy, some people go missing and they have never recovered. The families doesn't know whether they died in the tragedy or whatever happened to them. Even at Westgate, some people went missing and the families have never known whether they died in the incident or where they went. So that is something that we as security professionals, as security experts, we need also to keep in our mind that some people go missing, we don't know where they are, and they could have perished in these disasters without our knowledge. Sequence of events. Sequence of events. Now, during a normally busy afternoon in the central business district, traffic crawls through streets congested with pedestrians. Customers and employees in the crowded Nakumat supermarket go about their business. It is business as usual. A power transformer blows and the lights cut out, momentarily causing some confusion. Moments later, the backup generator can be heard as it is activated, rekindling the lights. We are at Nakumat. As the people regain their bearings, the lights go out again, followed by a plume of thick smoke that is shrouded by darkness, but chokes all that were within its reach. What was generalized confusion instantly turns into widespread panic. We spoke about smoke, thick smoke. So I will not repeat it. We spoke about smoke and we saw the dangers of smoke. The fire alarm sounds amid the screams. A few employees struggle with a fire hose as the flames spread from beneath the staircase where the generator is housed on the ground floor. Then there is a series of explosions as the fuel tanks stored next to the generator detonate. So fuel tanks stored next to the generator. So lesson number 1, just write something about smoke. Lesson number 2, write something about widespread panic. Lesson number 3, write something about fuel tanks stored next to the generator. So we speak about storage of highly flammable fuel next to heat sources. So those are the lessons that we are learning now. Talk about smoke, talk about widespread panic, talk about generators, storage, fuel stored next to generators. And this is the fire brigade arriving, battling the Nakumat supermarket fire in 2009. So that was how downtown Nairobi looked those years. And you can see the fire brigade engine on the ground. In the panic, a few brave people leaped from the upper floor's windows to the street below. One man died from injuries sustained during the fall, but a few sustained injuries but lived to tell the story. Risk, you have to take a risk in a fire emergency. By the time the last smoldering ashes were extinguished, at least 29 people were confirmed dead, with 47 missing. We just spoke about missing people, most likely charred beyond recognition. Their remains undistinguishable from the supermarket's stock and equipment. You can imagine fire with the intensity that burns beyond somebody beyond recognition, that you cannot be recognized, especially when mixed with the supermarket's stock and equipment. Among those dead were the young actress Angel Wainaina and the CEO of a leading Kenya local football team, Tusker FC. Among those dead. The irony of the fire was that the supermarket store was located just 100 meters away from Nairobi's only public fire station, which is one of the oldest structures in the city. When the firefighters finally came, the blaze was so hot that it had to be fought over 24 hours, within which time it had spread to neighboring buildings. 4 months after the fire, National Museums of Kenya announced that any new structure on the site would have to bear similar features to the previous Woolworths building, which was on one red brick building. The building has never been restored, and the area is now used as a car park, condoned off by huge billboards that hide what was once Nairobi's most convenient Nakumatt store. A lesson here is that the building has never been restored. Fire causes damage to an extent that it can wipe your facility, your organization, your enterprise completely from business. Fire can destroy your premises. Fire can destroy the building in which you are sitting now, and the building will never be restored. Fire is a threat that we need to constantly keep in our mind. Molo tanker fire. A few days later, after the Nakumatt, near the small town Sechangwan in the Molo district of the Rift Valley province, a second tragedy unfolded. Around 7:30 p.m., a tanker truck filled with approximately 42,000 liters of petrol traveling from Mombasa overturned on the side of the Nakuru-Eldoret Highway. Nakuru-Eldoret Highway. Sequence of events. As fuel spills onto the ground, word of the accident spreads and hundreds of nearby inhabitants rush to the scene. Drivers and motorcyclists call one another, and workers on nearby farms, villages, and shopping centers scurry to the site, as do dozens of children who are off school because of the weekend. With various containers and makeshift siphons in hand, there are frantic efforts to collect the split fuel. Some women with small children strapped on their backs are among those gathered. The crowd continues to enlarge as some proceed to drill holes into the tanker to expedite the collection process. Some even start charging a fee to collect the fuel. Lesson, crowd. It is a dangerous situation, and people are still coming together. People are still crowding together. People are still coming together. People are still crowding together. And some even start charging a fee to collect the petrol. Soon thereafter, the local police and paramilitary general service unit arrive in attempts to control the unsettled crowd. As the people continued to scuffle for the spilling petrol, a cigarette was believed to have triggered the fire and subsequent explosion. Hundreds of people hovered around the tanker and standing in surrounding petrol-filled trenches were incinerated immediately. Hundreds more standing within 50 meters of the truck also fell victim to the blast. The explosion set the surrounding forest ablaze, as well as several cars and motorcycles. Some of the burned victims tried to make their way through the wooded area to the nearby Molo River. 8 bodies were found at a nearby cattle trough as they attempted to douse the flames that consumed them. An estimated 91 victims were killed at the scene. Many of them were women and children. Many of them were women and children. 91 victims. Another 178 people sustained severe thermal injuries. Molo did not have its own fire engine. The Nakuru Municipal Council's firefighters did not arrive until an hour after the initial explosion. So another lesson, arrival time of responding teams, arrival time of firefighters, arrival times of emergency responders. Rescuers who arrived at the scene were kept at bay by the intense heat, neither able to fight the fire nor to help the injured victims. Most of the bodies were burned beyond recognition. Another reason, safety gear. You see, most of the rescuers who arrived at the scene were kept at bay by intense heat. So if they had the fireman suits, if they had the breathing apparatus, the helmets, the gloves, the fireman boots, then maybe they would have made an effort to go near the scene and to try to assist injured victims. The survivors were distributed to nearby hospitals. Unfortunately, these hospitals were still in the midst of dealing with the Nakumatt supermarket fire tragedy. Eventually, the death toll rose to 131 as more patients eventually succumbed to their injuries. It's very unfortunate. We lost more than 131 people, and I'm very sure we lost even more than this 131 because they have said some people were burned beyond recognition. They were burned beyond recognition, just as it happened at Nakumatt. It's a very unfortunate situation. And sorry, these photos are sometimes traumatizing, but you can see what happens in a fire emergency. And I can tell you, as a security professional, take fire protection as a very serious matter. Take fire protection as a very serious matter. Chances of people dying in fire occurrences are very high compared even to other situations. Take fire protection with the seriousness it deserves. Whatever we are learning in this course, ensure that you implement these things at your workplace. Conduct patrols, conduct inspections, confirm equipments are in serviceable order, confirm that we are abiding by the codes, by the regulations, confirm that we can protect facilities, we can protect people from the threat of fire. You can see how people were injured, even small children who had to undergo treatment because of third-degree burns or second-degree burns. Facial exhaustions. Emergency facial were performed as a matter of urgency to remove as much necrotic tissue as possible and limit the spaces. By modern standards, the conditions were minor. The medical supplies were extremely limited. Another lesson, medical supplies. You know, in Kenya or even in most countries in the world, supplies is an issue. Items that would routinely be thrown away in modern hospitals were recycled indefinitely. The sterile technique observed in contemporary operating rooms was difficult to perform. Essential equipment such as toughness, electrocautery, and powered instruments such as dermatomes were absent. Improvisations included the use of rubber gloves as tankers excursions were carried out by the sharp distortion and the skin graft harvest with a Hambi knife. I don't know why the scientists or the doctors, why the scientists who come up with these terms related to medical procedures use very difficult terms that one cannot even read clearly. I have never understood that because you see the language in the medical field is very confusing. So you have to really work very hard to understand the meaning of some of the terms. But you know, sometimes like sterile techniques, sometimes like talk nets, sometimes some terms like emergency, facial excisions, these kind of terms, you can understand them even at your level. In the days following the tragic events, the public and the media would express concern regarding the lack of fire preparedness and disaster response displayed by the city and the government for both incidences. Lack of disaster preparedness, lack of disaster response plans. Molo, a town with a population of approximately 90,000, completely lacked a fire brigade, the nearest being an hour away in the neighboring town of Nakuru. And I want you, as a security professional, just to find out from you, even your fellows in the local governments, because now there are so many opportunities, even at county level, where you can work. You can join the fire brigade of you are a security professional. You can join the fire brigade of a local a county government. Find out from these local governments how many engines do we have in local. How are we really investing in fire safety? I am away. I am trying to follow up whatever is happening in Kenya, but my being away is a long distance, very far away. But I really would like to know, or for you to understand, or to find out if there are disaster preparedness plans at county levels. Let's just talk about related to fire safety. Simple things. Do we have equipment? Do we have fire engines? Do we even train the personnel at county level to fight fire emergencies or to respond to fire emergencies? That is something that we need to find as security professionals. The situation regarding the Nakumatt supermarket was also scrutinized. In the capital city of Nairobi, with a population of more than 3 million by that time, 2009, there was only one fully equipped fire brigade. Only one. Although the fire station was within the downtown area, it took over an hour for the arrival of firefighters due to purely controlled traffic and a lack of response plan. Survivors and witnesses of the supermarket fire suspected that the supermarket employees and the security guards may have locked the doors to prevent looting, hence trapping customers in the building and preventing their escape. Another lesson: we are in an emergency and employees and security guards lock doors to prevent people from looting. And this is an emergency where we need to get people from risk zones to safer zones. So that is some area that we may need to think about when we talk about fire emergency preparedness or fire emergency plans. What do security guards do if we go into a fire emergency? Although the fire station was within the downtown area, it took over an hour for the arrival of firefighters due to poorly controlled traffic and a lack of response plan. Survivors and witnesses of the supermarket fire suspected that supermarket employees and security guards may have locked the doors to prevent looting, hence trapping customers in the building and preventing their escape. This was corroborated by difficulties in the firefighters encountered when trying to enter the building through these locked doors. Furthermore, the bodies that were recovered were hovered around the doors that normally served as exits. Investigation. You see what it says. It's very interesting that one of the reason they concluded that security guards might have locked the doors to prevent people from looting is that when firefighters arrived, they were unable to enter the building through those locked doors. Number two, the bodies that were recovered were hoovered around the doors that normally served as exits. You can see how investigation reveals whatever could have happened. The hospitals were certainly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of casualties, as well as the inability to access proper resources. Investigations. How these fires begin is often a matter of contention. Although the most common reason are toast cigarettes, we learned about that, static electricity, we talked about cords and other things, or even a spark from the overturned vehicle batteries. We all spoke about those as fire hazards. At 7:30 p.m., all hell broke loose with an explosion whose flames not only trapped the daredevils busy siphoning off fuel, but some of the people who thought they were standing a safe distance away from the disaster. The fire spread along the fuel leak, and with some of its victims who ran for near life hoping to find a fuel-free place to roll down and put off the fire. Another lesson: when you are engulfed in a fire or somebody is on fire, roll that person down to cut off disrupt the chemical reaction, or to disconnect the chemical reaction. When you roll somebody down, then the chances of cutting off the supply of air from his body and disrupting the chemical reaction happens, and you can save that person. Sadly, the nearby forest, we are still talking about Sachangwan, had caught fire too, turning the dark night into a horrific show of the destructive power of fire. Nearby cars and motorcycles exploded too, creating a cacophony of death and pain that would last the entire night. The first firefighting team arrived an hour into the disaster. Even then, the fire was too hot to do much, leaving most of the work for the rest of the night and the morning. By then, at least 113 people were nothing more than charred ashes, with hundreds more suffering from first and second degree burns. Can you do research on what we mean by first and second and third degree burns? 6 months later, a similar disaster occurred in Kapoyek village near Kericho, killing at least 45 people. The first such disaster happened in Banana Hill, Kiambu in the early 2000s and cost tens of lives. So 6 months later, a similar disaster occurred in Kapoyek village near Kericho, killing at least 45 people. The first such disaster happened in Banana Hill, Kiambu in the early 2000s and cost tens of lives. Let's look at another disaster, the Sinai Pipeline Sea of Fire. Sinai Pipeline Sea of Fire. Unlike the people of Sachangwan and Kapoyek who traveled to their fiery death, the people of Sinai had been living next to an oil pipeline for decades. The risk had been known, another lesson, for many years before that fateful and chilly September morning, but only feeble attempts had been made to relocate the squatters. In the morning of September 12th, 2011, the residents of Mukuru, Sinai woke up to what many thought was a hydrocarbon manna. Sometime in the night, a failed gasket at a nearby fuel tank owned by the Kenya Pipeline Company had given in, releasing over 19 million cubic meters of fuel into an open storm drain that flowed right through Sinai. Another lesson, known risk. Sometimes we are aware of these risks, but we do nothing. We don't take any action. So as security professionals, we must be aware of these risks. And when we encounter these risks, we must do something about it. We must take action about these risks. It was not the first time such a spillage had occurred, and on cue, hundreds of residents rushed to scoop the fuel. What was different was that this time the fuel was petrol and not the diesel that leaked during previous times. You see, another lesson. The fuel was petrol this time, not diesel that leaked during previous times. No one knows what exactly started the fire, and no one is even sure it had just one cause. What followed through, though, was a scene straight from seventh hell, an explosion of death so wild and fiery that it would dwarf all previous petroleum disasters in the country. Not the first time do we ever learn from these disasters. It was not the first time, but do we ever learn from these disasters? We are in 2011 and we had a disaster in 2009 at Sachangwan, the same disaster related to fuel explosion. People were scooping fuel, and even here, people are still scooping fuel. The fire spread so fast and so wide that its actual cost in human lives is still just a rough estimate. Fire spreads very fast, another lesson. The fire spread across the slum, raising down the shanties built of carbon box material and other combustible materials. Even worse, the early birds had kept their flammable loot in their houses, worsening the already remarkable situation. Since it was a settlement, an illegal one nonetheless, the population was undocumented and many people were still at home or conducting their businesses when the fire chased them down and burned them to nothing. When the sea of flames finally died out, it was clear that its damage was unprecedented. So many lessons there you can learn. Undocumented people, nobody knows how many people died in this situation. This was fuel, this was petrol, other times it was diesel. You can see how fires occur, and the risk here was evident that these people were living, staying under a pipeline for Kenya Pipeline. I don't know why the risk analysts never foresaw that one day, one time, there can be a disaster for this magnitude. I don't know why some things usually pass even the government inspectors, even the government officials, even the security professionals ourselves. Why some things bypass us that we don't see, there is a disaster forthcoming. The death toll hit 100 people by the 13th September and is estimated at anywhere between 190 and 300 people, while 116 people were hospitalized. The exact number will never be known because of a good number were undocumented and some were lost in the nearby river Ngong. The murky waters of the river, coupled with the fact that all the fuel that wasn't being scooped into jerrycans was flowing into the river, made it a waiting hell for the victims who plunged into the river hoping to put off the fires that were killing them and at least cool down their bodies. You see, they are jumping into the river, it cool down their bodies to kill off the fire that was killing them, but then the river is already full of petrol. There is an ongoing class action suit against the Kenya Pipeline Company for gross negligence and corporate manslaughter. If you are a student of strategic management, another course that is ongoing also, you can remember we spoke also about organizational responsibility towards the society or towards the government or towards its staff responsibility. So a company can be sued for gross negligence and corporate manslaughter if it doesn't consider the welfare of the society, of the community in which it is located. Another tragedy. You remember Kianguli Mixed Secondary School arson. We are now talking about arson. Another lesson. At approximately 1:41 a.m. on March 26, 2001, an arsonist poured petrol in the middle of a dome at Kianguli Mixed Secondary School and struck a match. There were 2 doors on either end of the dorm, but one was bolted shut because someone had lost the keys and no one ever bothered to break the lock. Keys, key control. The windows were barricaded with metal grills, leaving only a single exit point as the only salvation for the 146 boys sleeping in the dormitory at that time. Another lesson: grills on doors, means of escape, emergency exits. For the half closet to that door, a quick means of escape was definite. For the others on the other side of the door, that fateful night would be their last. By daybreak that day, 68 young boys aged 14 and 20 had been reduced to nothing but smoldering ashes, meshed together with what remained of their mattresses, beddings, and belongings. No fire service responded in the hours the inferno was bringing down the building, eventually making the tin roof collapse on the helpless students. The original report to the police in the night was that it was just student unrest and did not explicitly mention the raging fire until it was too late for half the boys in the dormitory. Accurate reporting. Accurate reporting. You see, the original report to the police in the night was that it was just student unrest. So even you as a security professional, if you are on duty, your reporting must be accurate. If something happens and you're supposed to report to the authorities, then your reporting must be accurate, because sometimes we pass over information that is incorrect, and then people fail to respond to an issue, and then we end up losing life. In the days preceding the disaster, there had been tension in the school over a myriad of things, chief among them being the cancellation of the results of 100 students who had done their KCE examination in the next year. The bone of contention was whether they should pay fees to retake the year and resit the examination. As the tension simmered among the students, reports of strong pungent smell of petroleum spread. The school administration panicked and set out to find the flammable liquid, but they only searched the second school grounds and not the dormitories, where it was most likely hidden. Thorough search is another lesson. Thorough search exercise. Policy is another lesson. Procedures, conduct drills. Security professionals, if you are asked to search for something, then make sure you conduct a thorough search. And there should be a policy, there should be procedures, and drills should be conducted. Those are some of the lessons from this fire at Kianguli. Two 16-year-olds, Felix Mambo and David Onyango, were eventually charged with a senseless act of arson that resulted in mass murder. The headmaster and his deputy were charged with failing to prevent a felony. As is common in such disasters, most of the dead were buried in a mass grave, their young embers extinguished by a single act of madness. 3 years before the Kianguli fire disaster, another fire had gutted down a dorm in near similar circumstances at the Bombolulu Girls Secondary School. The fire had killed 25 girls, also in the middle of the night. Lessons, lessons, lessons. My fellows, let us learn lessons from these disasters. Let us put these lessons into practice. Let us put measures in place based on these lessons. We have seen a lot of lessons in this case study presentation. We have spoken about smoke. We have spoken about locking doors in emergencies. We have spoken about response time. We have spoken about coordination. We have spoken about evident risk. We have spoken about such thorough search policy procedures. We have spoken about drills. We have spoken about arson, which is fire deliberately started. We have spoken about spotting fire hazards and reporting procedures. We have spoken about clarity in the information that you pass over to the officials, to the government, or to your seniors. The information must be on point. We have spoken about so many lessons in this presentation, and I hope that you will take these lessons home and you will think about them, and you will patrol your areas with the aim of preventing such disasters happening in future. With those few remarks, I say thank you very much for listening to me today. Once again, my name is Wayne. We are going to meet again after the CAT. Prepare for the CAT, because the next weekend we shall be doing the CAT exams, and then from there now we pick on the next levels of our fire safety training. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Bye-bye.